back in April 2016, I made a top 10 worst list on the show SpongeBob, and that video was the first video of mine to ever go viral, and still remains one of my most popular and most well-known videos. And SpongeBob has since become the main show to review on my channel, which I have no idea how to feel about. I mean, I grew up with it, and it's a staple of my childhood. But SpongeBob lost its way after season 5, which, I mean, I guess that's not necessarily the show's fault. It did end up getting an entirely new staff, and that change was apparent once season 6 through 8 came around. Not to mention that new staff ended up having less time to work on their episodes, which all but guaranteed those seasons would be nowhere near as good as the first few seasons. Luckily after that, the great Stephen Hillenburg, as well as most of the original staff, came back, and it seems like they've righted the ship somewhat. To be fair, the fact that the 9th season alone took nearly 5 years to complete probably helped out these episodes a bit. But now it's time to finally give those seasons some praise. Now, not including seasonal reviews, the last video I did, I had the always well-mannered Shadow Streak on. And the video before that, I had the always well-spoken one and only C.R. Martin on. So I guess it's time to bring in the big guns. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me today is the always intelligent Alpha J Show.
Ayo, what is up everyone? It is the Alpha J of the Alpha J Show, and today we're going to cover the best SpongeBob episodes of Season 9 and 10. Like Jem said, SpongeBob is a big part of his channel, and also a big part of mine. In fact, many of us joined YouTube through the whirlwind that was Season 9, where half of the season lives in this mediocre territory, and the other half is praise, primarily due to more focus, a certain movie that came out, and the creator coming back to work despite being diagnosed with ALS. So let's not stall any further.
Indeed, this is the top 10 best SpongeBob episodes from seasons 9 and 10.
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Patrick's Coupon. Yeah, that's right. We're starting with a Patrick-centered episode. Let that tell you how much these seasons actually improved. Now, you know I've had my issues with Patrick, as I'm sure you have too, right, Alpha J?
Oh yeah, Patrick has had quite a few infamous episodes that I have had the questionable pleasure of talking about. Heck, even in these 2 seasons, you have episodes like Squid Baby that don't really show him in the best light.
That's true, but credit where it's due, there are a little more episodes that show him in the kind of light that he was seen in from the first 3 seasons. Most of the time. This episode is about Patrick wanting to buy SpongeBob an ice cream with the coupon he has, and all the hell he goes through that he's willing to push through just to do that for him, which shows off the likable best friend side that had long been missing in these recent seasons. And it's even nicer when you realize Patrick isn't doing this for any selfish reason. It really is all because he cares for his buddy.
Oh, and just so that we don't gush over it in every entry, let's talk about the animation changes that happened through seasons 9 and 10. The animation style has become a lot more smooth and cartoony, instead of this rigid, relaxed, and sometimes a little realistic pace that was pretty much seasons 4 through 8. I think it works well in many areas, from the initial battle with the spider and Patrick to Krabs trying to pick up the sea star with the crane. Honestly, I think for the wacky style that the show wants to gear over to, it works well, and with Patrick's naivety and lack of giving things a light touch, often breaking and falling over himself, it gives the animators a lot of leeway to create some interesting movements. The episode also gives me huge Donut of Shame vibes, with how Patrick wants to make SpongeBob proud by going through extraneous means.
Not to mention there's also a very well done fight scene at the end, where Patrick has to prove he's worthy to a carbon copy of himself, which actually leads to some pretty clever comedic moments that you would kind of expect to be more obnoxious instead. It's amazing that an episode that has 2 Patricks in it can be one that 2 reviewers who normally despise him can consider one of the best, but here we are. Safe to say this episode is one of the biggest and best surprises these seasons have to offer.
The butterscotch style is strong though, Fat, but it is no match for my brownie bits. You'll wish your cone was a cup when I whip you into cream. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Pull up a barrel. With this episode, it gives a creative concept. Let me pitch it to you. Mr. Krabs recalls a tale from his old Navy days, but replaced the major shipmates that he had back in his old Navy days with the main characters of the show. It's interesting in premise, and it's much better when actually watching. I definitely enjoyed the pirate aspect, especially considering how we don't get many, quote, Krabs showing his pirate side episodes, to which I would definitely want more of.
The casting of the crew is much more spot on than you would think. I mean, SpongeBob and Squidward playing a naive guard and a strict guard respectively, that's pretty straightforward, but Patrick being a stern, jackass captain, I mean, that ended up being the best casting choice of the episode if you ask me, because Patrick plays this role flawlessly, which makes it even more memorable.
So, tonight's meal is gonna be terrible, you understand me? Aye, sir. The worst you've ever made. Aye, sir. The kind of slump that'll put some steel in their spines.
Stuff like that is usually high risk, high reward, so that really shows how improved the writing staff in these seasons are. There's also, arguably, one of the best jokes this show has ever come up with.
Snap out of it, man! You!
My personality!
That one-liner is so smart, so true, and so funny that it belongs in the SpongeBob One-Liner Hall of Fame, right next to the always classic,
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
also when the pirates attack led by Sandy, another great casting choice, while only coming near the end of the episode, still packs such a fun, entertaining punch, and it always leaves a smile on my face. And what better way to end this episode? By opening the doors to more fan fiction.
Handsome and clever, I see.
Yeah, the whole Sandy thinking Krabs is handsome thing was pretty out of left field, but besides that, it was a very energetic episode which followed Krabs as a hero for saving what was a pretty stubborn captain. I enjoyed how Patrick subverted how you'd normally want to treat your crew so that they can be, quote, manly, and how this slop was also used towards the end of the story as sort of a full circle. Also, I thought it was a neat reference to Food Fight, not that Food Fight, but the Fairly OddParents episode, when the crewmate assumed that the slop was supposed to look bad, but also most likely taste good. The fighting was great, SpongeBob's carefree but also determined when needed attitude shined throughout this episode, and even Squidward's part wasn't really that bad. It's a really great episode and I definitely recommend you watch it if you want to see the Uncommon Pirate Krabs episode.
Patrick Man. Now we get to move on to what is not only another great Patrick episode, but also a fun little superhero episode, and one that isn't centered around Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. This episode is about Patrick feeling like he isn't accomplishing anything in life, wonder where he got that idea from, and deciding he wants to become a superhero as a career. But because it's Patrick, he, of course, ends up becoming a super menace.
Don't move and freeze! Let's see you try to bust out of that, boat thief.
Boat thief? Heavens, no! My poor student is trapped inside this boat.
A likely story.
One theme you'll notice between not just this episode but many episodes further down the line on this list is that they maintain this wacky or childish or spontaneous atmosphere that pre-movie SpongeBob dabbled with quite well. And Patrick Man is no different. I definitely enjoyed Patrick in this season 9 episode, especially considering others. However, not the best superhero episode. I am glad that we did get to see actual villains try to battle toe-to-toe with the Pink Menace because it glues this consistency between seeing these minor characters often, and I enjoy that. Plus, it's funny how now he's battling the dirty bubble, because I remember in Mermaid Man and Marco Boy 3 that he annoyed Man Ray to the point where he had enough of the sea star. Also, that part with Mr. Krabs and $1 was gold.
Please, ma'am, allow me.
Huh? Why, thank you, young man.
Not a problem, ma'am. It's the least I could do. Oh. Sorry, lady, you're on your own.
You know, that Mr. Krabs scene was one of the first indications that this show was almost on par with its glory days. In the infamous seasons, Mr. Krabs' only personality was simply greed. Whereas in the earlier seasons, while greed was still a part of his personality, he was still a father-like figure of a character, with episodes like Sudge showing off his more caring side. In fact, in those seasons, this act from Mr. Krabs wouldn't seem all that strange. And it's not just Mr. Krabs. This episode also shows off how Patrick has now gotten back on track, even more so than Patrick's coupon did. While Patrick was adult, he was supposed to be more like a wide-eyed innocent child, and the harm he did cause felt very innocent and with little to no real malicious intent. It's like when Homer Simpson messes up. You hardly ever feel like he's doing it deliberately. This episode, in my opinion, fixed what was quickly becoming one of the show's most glaring issues, its characters. And on top of that, it's still a very entertaining and very humorous superhero episode. Really, what more could you ask for from a SpongeBob episode?
I think I need you to use your superpowers one last time.
What's this?
Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
2 thumbs down. So with the episodes like Rip Pants and Muscle Bob Buff Pants, we get SpongeBob essentially figuring out a thing and using that thing to make people around him happy, but gets carried away with it. Now, unlike Married to Money, a season 9 episode that shamelessly took the plot of Imitation Krabs and thumbed its nose at the people who notice, 2 thumbs down takes the concept of these former 2 episodes and makes it into an incredible episode worthy of praise.
It's about SpongeBob overusing giving people thumbs ups to the point where he completely destroys his thumbs. And by the way, can I just state how hilariously overdramatic this scene is?
My thumbs! My thumbs! My thumbs!
That's more pre-movie feeling gold humor right there. What I like the most about this episode is that it's taking the most minimalistic plot device it can find, in this case thumbs, and making an 11-minute long episode that's creative, has great comedy, sprinkles in some nice drama. Hell, it even has a song that, you know what, I probably would have considered putting on my top 10 best SpongeBob songs list if I knew about it at the time. I mean, I never thought this would be possible, but this song actually makes me appreciate my thumbs a little bit more.
Thumbs are opposable, thumbs are great. We share them with the monkeys and with the apes. You can grab, you can tie, you can pinch a cheek, but without your thumbs, you're all thumbs. All thumbs, no thumbs, busted up your thumbs. Sucking on your pinky would sure look dumb. You'll never hitch a ride or pull out a plum. Without your thumbs, you're all thumbs.
Gem? Pal? You doing okay over there?
God, Alpha J, I'll never take my thumbs for granted again. I need a moment.
Oh dear, it's worse than I could have imagined. Thumbnickel difficulties. Even some of the minor characters in which you see, like Sandy or Mr. Krabs, do provide great entertainment for what little screen time they have. You have Sandy giving the initial warning to not go too far, but also the drama that Jem stated earlier, being centered around Sandy trying to rile up the sponge to get out of the house and not be so depressed over his thumbs. Let's talk about that though. SpongeBob here is really sad, but unlike other episodes, like Are You Happy Now?, I am not too concerned for his well-being. Also, this episode takes it further with its execution, with the neat montage of SpongeBob essentially rehabbing his thumbs back to normal, and the incredible fight towards the end, sort of bringing the initial thumb war we saw in the beginning to a close. Overall, 2 thumbs down is an incredible build on a former concept that SpongeBob tackled before, and I would definitely go back to rewatch it.
The job's taken.
Well, I'm taking it back.
Just how you gonna do that?
Somewhere.
Well, since it looks like it's gonna be me from now on, let's continue at number 6.
No, it's okay. Apparently technical difficulties only last about as long as that song. Who knew? Now, let's continue.
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Safe deposit crabs. Wait, on this list we have 2 Patrick episodes and 2 Mr. Krabs episodes? Damn, that's pretty amazing if you ask me. This episode is about Mr. Krabs wanting to open a bank account so he can get free interest. And after scaring the bank teller a few times, he finally succeeds, but ends up getting his fat ass stuck in the bank. Literally. So because he's stuck with all this money but nothing to do with it, he slowly starts going insane.
What's that? Don't start on me now. I'm sure this remote island has a food source. Krabs just hasn't found it yet, that's all.
Now, this is an episode centered around Mr. Krabs and money, and it works. Here's how. Unlike multiple episodes that focus on Krabs' greed, selfishness, and unwillingness to learn from his mistakes, this focuses more on his borderline unhealthy but cartoonish obsession with money, taking place of logical decisions to protect himself. As he's in this bank, stuck with the rest of the valuables, slowly going insane due to lack of air, we also have SpongeBob, who is very worried for Krabs. There is a pattern of using previous concepts and doing much better at them in seasons 9 and 10, and this one is probably one of my personal favorites because we have so many episodes revolving around the topic of Krabs' greed. However, here, the person at expense is himself. He isn't hurting anyone, and thus it is more of a personal battle for Krabs and the Sponge, revolving around a tried and tested topic. I also enjoyed the climax, and I found it to be truly exciting. Just the thought of being trapped in a giant container of bamboo. Yeah, you're definitely going to have to drag me out because I'd probably go insane myself.
I'm also pretty sure this episode got some inspiration from Money Talks, which shows Mr. Krabs getting what he thinks he wants more than anything, only to discover it's a living hell. Being trapped with money and being unable to spend it sounds like what Mr. Krabs can look forward to once his old ass finally kicks the bucket. And it's a setup where the comedy just writes itself. You know, looking back on it, I'm a bit stunned it took them 9 seasons to finally make an episode like this. Wow, this show really does save its best ideas for later, and I give them a ton of props for that, because this episode is money.
The lady would like to start with 1 million clams, a side of investments, and hold the taxes. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Club SpongeBob was a great episode I loved watching as a child. Everything from the initial treehouse snubbing from SpongeBob and Patrick to the legendary conch shell made it such an amazing episode that stands the test of time. So when you take that episode and combine it with the genius of pizza delivery, you get this fantastic episode, Food Con Castaways.
When Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick head out to a food convention to get the Krabby Patty judged, they end up getting lost in the forest with that Krabby Patty being their only source of food, which, as you can tell, leads to some hilarious situations as SpongeBob needs to fight off not only his urges, but everyone else's so they can get the Krabby Patty judged. Now, as Alpha J said, there are a ton of scenes that give off Club SpongeBob and Pizza Delivery-like vibes. From the creepy, yet still very creative forest they're stuck in, to the hilarious situations that arise from SpongeBob fighting off hungry, desperate people.
I will not eat you.
Shh, I can hear him over there. He's arguing with the patty. Get him, Cameron! Don't let him get away!
There's also some nice little twist this episode decides to throw you in order to keep you on your toes. Make no mistake, it's an episode that you will have a tough time predicting your first time around, but even after watching it the first time, this episode does a great job making sure some of these twists are still entertaining enough for you to want to come back to, despite already knowing what's gonna happen. And that's the sign of a phenomenal episode in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more, Gem. This episode has tons of things going for it. I definitely enjoy the tried and true back and forth with multiple characters wanting a single item. Plus, for a third time, Patrick actually doesn't do anything that I personally found annoying. I definitely think the comedy was spot on, and one of the spots that I remember to this day is the nature patties that everyone except the pink glutton did not enjoy. This is another episode that shows off the determination of the yellow sponge really well, and all of the interesting environments come together for a visually interesting episode. I found the pink and yellow duo to be pretty funny during the beginning, but let's also talk about that ending. As you may know, or may not know, Patrick ends up taking the original patty, thus the judge at the food con taking the nature patty, and in a twist of events, he ends up liking the nature patty for its eccentric taste. If that isn't a good twist, I'm not sure what would be. What a fantastic episode, and definitely deserving of the top 5.
Mermaid pants. You know, a wise man once told me that what made the earlier episodes of SpongeBob so great was that they mostly focused on comedy with a simple but good story. And you know what? That was one of the truest and wisest things I ever heard. I wonder whatever happened to that wise man.
I think he got trapped in that giant container of bamboo, but thanks to the help of the power of positivity and a chainsaw, here he is today to talk about mermaid pants.
Well, here's hoping I see him again someday. Anyway, that wise man was correct, because this episode is the one that probably feels the closest to a pre-movie episode, since it follows that exact same logic. It's about SpongeBob and Patrick playing Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and Mr. Krabs and Squidward eventually join them. That's really it for the story. It's simplistic, and it's filled with a ton of comedy. Mr. Krabs and Squidward playing the villains of SpongeBob and Patrick's game feels very equivalent to watching parents play with their children. It's almost kind of heartwarming at points. Of course, this is still SpongeBob, so eventually the episode gets pretty intense, but in a very entertaining and fun to watch way. And the references to comic book cliches here are also very well written and seem to add a level of charm to the episode.
I sold it myself. It's Captain Tightwad from issue 53.
That's right, here in Mermaid Man number 98. No superhero shall fight a supervillain until that supervillain has committed a crime.
Yeah, I really wanted to double down on that point. This episode really does have SpongeBob and Patrick hyper and super excited towards the beginning. The two annoy Squidward both at work and at home, and drive away Krabs' customers. This could have easily went into the worst of the worst territory if it weren't for Krabs' reaction. Far too long have we seen episodes like Giant Squidward, where the two would go really far with their hyperactive behavior, and it comes across as a loud but generally unpleasant episode to sit through. Here, because Krabs decides to play along, and later Squidward, we have the four going through shenanigans together. I enjoyed the part where Krabs and Squidward, quote, pretend to rob the bank, or even the twist with Squidward towards the end with the deep fryer. However, my favorite part would have to be SpongeBob and Patrick hamming it up while singing the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy theme song. Mermaid Pants is definitely up there as one of the better episodes overall in SpongeBob, and it'd be amazing if you can give this one a shot.
Hey, what are you doing?
Being evil. Isn't that what you wanted? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Bulletin board. Now, one reason I think SpongeBob has lasted as long as it has, despite its horrible middle seasons, is because it has a knack for changing with the times. While episodes like Are You Happy Now flopped badly, it still tried to address what had become a much more serious problem in today's day and age: depression. And one thing that I personally feel has led to an increase in that is the internet, because of the anonymity it gives you to where you can say whatever you want. So this episode tries to tackle that same topic, and you know what? They do it in one of the most mature, yet still very funny and kid-friendly ways.
One of your eyes is too big.
Close your mouth when you eat.
Squidward tentacles should never be allowed behind a cash register.
I think one of the biggest reasons this episode works so well is because it's shown all sides of the conflict. You have the initial person who created the community as a way to generate more money, the community who enjoy it but tend to feel and think very similar, the initial misunderstanding or flat out insult, and the victim who tries to fix everything by trying to get better, not knowing that there may not be anything to truly fix the problem. This episode also has that Bikini Bottomites thinking very similar, but unlike in their other season 9 episode, Little Yellow Book, there isn't hypocrisy here, and their attraction towards this anonymous person makes the drama here worthwhile. I think the care taken to handle this topic in a pretty mature and well-rounded way works, because you wouldn't think about SpongeBob giving commentary on such a polarizing topic as the internet and mob mentality. Who knows, maybe a bit of it is stirred by the recent bashing of what was the latest season at the time.
Oh, that certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't know for sure why Stephen Hillenburg came back, but I wouldn't be surprised if the backlash this show received for episodes like One Course Meal and A Pal for Gary played a bit of a role in his comeback. And you know what? Props to SpongeBob for tackling this topic in a much more mature way. Overall, this episode is a learning experience. People are going to deal with criticism every day with the internet. That's just how the world is now. So it's best to learn how to live with it and maybe even not care about the complaints that just seem petty. Definitely something I feel belongs in the top 3.
Can't you see what's happened? This bulletin board has become a bullying board!
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Plankton's Pet. One of the most praised season 9 episodes that I've constantly heard positive things about, and for good reason. Let's put this into perspective. Season 7 gave us such unique, creative, and totally not ripped off from Imitation Crab's masterpieces, such as Shellback Shenanigans, Grandma's Secret Recipe, and Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy, where Plankton was up to the same stale mess over and over again. Season 8 would go on to give us the same Krabs and Plankton spiel, with Move It or Lose It, Fiasco, and Walking the Plankton. Season 9, right off the bat mind you, gives us this episode. Does it have Plankton trying to get a Krabby Patty, like those other episodes? Yes. So what makes it different? Why is it ranked so high?
Well, 2 things. It has personality and it has heart. This episode is about Plankton once again failing to get the formula, which, for the record, leads to one of this show's best dark jokes.
That's harsh.
What's he doing? You leave that poor baby alone!
And after being down about it, Karen talks him into getting a pet to help him feel better, and Plankton ends up finding a very lovable little amoeba that he named Spot. And the episode focuses entirely on their bond, and it gives you such a warm, fuzzy feeling, especially if you yourself are a pet owner.
Nice rebound, Spot. You know, I get squished a lot too. I hope nobody saw that emotional outburst.
Aww.
Now, while this episode is still, in a way, a rehash of another great episode, Have You Seen the Snail, it's still capturing the same feels that episode gives you in a completely different style. While Have You Seen the Snail focuses on the pains of losing your pet, Plankton's Pet focuses on the joys of bonding with your pet. And while there are still moments that tug at your heartstrings, they don't feel manipulative in the slightest. They feel very real. And to make Plankton, the general bad guy of the series, have something that can make him happy that isn't centered on the formula, it's just a breath of fresh air for his character.
Which was very needed. And just like with Pull Up a Barrel, it kind of shows that you don't need to play it safe all the time, and have your major characters do what they usually would be doing. The risk taken there and here have led to this being the best episode of Season 9. I enjoy how Plankton struggles with taking care of a pet, as Plankton generally deals with computers, which take commands, unless it's Karen on a bad day. Oh, and speaking of Karen, she actually isn't as annoying in this episode, compared to her One Course Meal performance. I agree with Jem. This is a very heartwarming episode for pet owners. Just seeing Plankton looking for a pet that isn't Patrick, or even when Plankton gets a Krabby Patty using Spot, his pet, only for Spot to eat the patty as a reward, are very relatable things. The way that Spot comes through towards the end with defending his owner against a much bigger and much scarier group of pets was truly exciting. All in all, a very admirable episode. It hits close to home and definitely deserves the top 3 as well.
You sneaky little amoeba, you.
Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Mimic Madness. Going back to what that wise man once told me, who I still hope to find again someday.
Oh god, this again? Where's that chainsaw?
What made the earlier SpongeBob episodes so memorable was the way they were structured. And it really seems like these episodes, especially the top 3 on this list, have decided to reverse that structure by focusing more on a good story with good comedy sprinkled in. And the episode that shows that off the best is Mimic Madness, which is basically the anti-face freeze with 2 thumbs down sprinkled in. Because it involves SpongeBob finding out he has a knack for imitations and getting carried away with them, only to end up being unable to stop doing them. Now, the most impressive thing about this episode has nothing to do with the writing or the comedy. No, it's Tom Kenny. His impressions of these characters are so incredible that it's no surprise he's considered one of the greatest living voice actors.
Are we having fun yet, Squidward tentacles?
I'm gonna eat ice cream and go jellyfishing with my good buddy SpongeBob.
Howdy, Wampus, Plankton. You're just about the tiniest goddamn critter I ever did see.
Mimic Madness is well known for being of the bigger episodes that caught a lot of people's attention. Although the impressions were a big part of the comedy, what made this episode stick in many people's hearts was the flawless execution of, well, everything. You have the initial tests of impressions that work well, the guy who screams, "I said eat your patties!" Characters that really interact like Sandy and Plankton, actually having a scene together, SpongeBob getting caught up in doing what he thinks is funny, the going overboard scene, and let's not forget the song. Now, SpongeBob songs are some of the most memorable songs when it comes to television animation. So with these later seasons of SpongeBob, especially this episode, they truly knock it out of the park with this one. I actually found SpongeBob's performance to be incredible. This episode is a symbol of, well, having a comeback. You can go back to what worked before, but you need to be yourself in order to grow. And I feel like this episode shines a light on why seasons 9 and 10 work so well.
Everything you want in a good SpongeBob episode is here. It's creative, it's funny, it's well written, the characters are all at their best, and the cherry on top, a really amazing song. This song came out after my video though, or else I definitely would have included it. And as Alpha J brilliantly stated, this episode was the official return to form for this show. While episodes like Plankton's Pet were still amazing, they're still surrounded with a lot of episodes that weigh the 9th season down, to where the episode almost started to feel like just a lucky strike. But after Mimic Madness, it started to feel like the staff had found their groove again. In fact, this episode resulted in many SpongeBob fans, myself included, coming back to the show we all grew up loving. Bottom line, this episode is an absolute masterpiece.
I just can't recognize myself. I don't know if I'm ready.
And that'll be it for this video and for my top 10 best SpongeBob episodes list for a while. I do intend on doing one on season 11 once that season is done, and maybe start doing a list for each of the following seasons instead of combining multiple seasons. And before I go, I want to give you a big thank you for joining me on this list, Alpha J. It was a blast to talk about this childhood classic of ours with you.
Thanks for having me on, Jem, and I'll make sure to respond to as many comments as I can. It was truly a blast to talk about The Sponge with such a talented reviewer.
Likewise, my friends. If you guys want to check out the Alpha J Show, there will be a link to a few of his videos as well as to his channel in the description below. Guys, Alpha J is, at the time of making this, so close to hitting 100,000 subs, which is a massive milestone in the animation reviewing community. And if he, by some miracle, hasn't hit it yet by the time this video comes out, or hell, even if he has, I urge as many of you as possible to go check out his videos and consider subscribing to him. He's one of the more in-depth reviewers in this whole community, and he's someone worth checking out if you really want to see a different side to an episode that you've never really considered before. And if you're new here, don't be afraid to let me know if there are any other requests you guys have for future reviews. Anyway, thank you all for watching, thank you to all of my reviewer friends who have joined me in these last few months, and I'll see you in the next review.
Given that this is not the first time the show has made an episode about two people in love, the matchmaker is a lot more surprising than the shell in that regard. Bobby, for the most part, will be taking a back seat, as well as Hank to an extent. So yes, this is another Peggy Hill episode, but it isn't centered on her.